Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. It's my pleasure today to be here with Santa Barbara City Council member Eric Friedman. Eric Friedman, how are you doing today?
Good morning, Josh. It's great to be here and to be on the show. I'm a big fan of the show.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. I get to watch you on Tuesdays at the council meetings, and I feel like like I know you, and I'm closer to you because you see you on the TV, and some days those meetings are hours. So I'm seeing you every week. I haven't really seen you too much lately in real life because of the pandemic. So I'm really excited that we got the opportunity to talk face to face here. I wanted to just dive right in and talk to you about something that came up recently. You're running for re-election in Santa Barbara, District 5, and I wanted to ask you about the endorsement process. As you know, last week you interviewed for an endorsement with the Santa Barbara County Democratic Party Central Committee. And, Santa Barbara is a nonpartisan race, but obviously endorsements matter. They matter in terms of support and in-kind resources. And if you're a Democrat voter and you see somebody who's got the Democrat Party behind them on a piece of literature, that holds a lot of weight. And so those endorsements are influential, even in nonpartisan local elections. So I wanted to ask you, Eric, because you're endorsing for, you're seeking the endorsement. And one of the questions that came up during your re-election endorsement interview had to do with your support of your mother, Celeste Barber. And, she's involved in some Santa Barbara City College politics. She ran for office, and, she's very, she said the pledge at a meeting, and it got a lot of attention locally and nationally. This was after Santa Barbara City College had temporarily tried to stop the pledge from opening their meetings. And so, there was some question and there was some concern and there was some skepticism of whether to support you, because during her campaign, you decided to endorse her. And, the obvious sort of reaction is, yes, but it's politics, yes, but this is also his mother, right? This is the woman who gave birth to him and who is very much, it's his mom, But I wanted to ask you, that was the question. Why should the Democratic Party consider supporting you when you supported candidates that were counter to the platform of the Democratic Party, particularly in that Board of Trustees race? So let me just ask you, Eric, first of all, when you had that question, right, what was your reaction? Did you expect it? Were you taken aback? What did you think when you heard that question from a member of the committee?
Well, first, I just want to say I had a sense that it was going to be asked, and appreciate you asking these questions and just giving me an opportunity to just explain what happened from my perspective. And it had come up at the Young Dems the week before. And I really do respect that it got brought up, because it is something that's out there, and to have had the opportunity to just explain in detail of my thought process. And I am very cognizant of the concerns that some of them might have up there on it. But for me, first of all, she's my mom, and I love my mom, and she raised me, and my sons love her, my wife. And she worked at City College for 20 years, and I know her whole history. And I wanted to take that opportunity to really kind of tell her history in some parts of it, and to show that all of us are complex, family's complex. I don't always agree with everything that my mom says. She doesn't agree with some of the votes I take at council, and believe me, she lets me know. And we have those discussions. And when she decided to run for City College Board of Trustees last year, of course I was going to support her. I think her opponent, Ann Everett, was very highly qualified as well. And so I think our city was very fortunate to have two highly qualified candidates who really care about the students in City College run. In this case, one happened to be my mom, and of course I was going to support her. And for me, what it also comes down to is I know the person she is. I know her whole life, her whole history. And my wife does, Julie, and also my sons. And if I had taken the position of not to support her for a political reason, because that would be the only reason not to support her, the thing that would have really affected me was, how could I have ever looked my sons in the eye again and said, when I was on city council, and your mom ran or your grandma ran for school board, I didn't support her because they know who she is and we do as a family. So I took that opportunity to just share parts of her story, some parts of it, so that they know that this one incident that happened at City College is just one small part of an entire life. And it's one of the larger issues in our society today is we're very out to judge people on one moment. So I wanted to take the time to really walk through who she is in the limited amount of time I had.
Yeah. So can we give you that platform a little bit here? Can you just talk a little bit about what you told the committee in terms of your explanation for why you still supported her despite some of the events around that campaign?
Sure. So with my mom, I used two incidents in her life, and both of them have really affected me. The first one in particular, when I grew up in Santa Barbara, we had moved here. She was a single mom, and then about 10 years later, in 1989, we moved up to Lompoc. Her and my mom, my stepdad, the late UCSB professor Frank McConnell, and we moved to Lompoc in the late 80s, early 90s. And she was known as a liberal in a conservative town, in fact, arguably the most conservative town in the county, in a conservative time in our country. And one night, what happened was there was a young woman of color gave birth to a baby that tested positive for heroin. And at the time, our country was really pushing penalties for drugs, so the baby was taken away, a newborn baby, and the mom was put in jail. And word got out, and in the town, and everybody was outraged. But my mom looked at it in a different way, that something needed to be done here because that woman cared about her baby, but the throes of addiction are so strong that she couldn't overcome the addiction. So she went down to the jail, I think it was the holding facility in Lompoc, and met with the woman. She never met her before. And just so she wasn't alone that night. And so when they released her, my mom drove her home and said, there has to be a better way to deal with these types of circumstances. And so she went out into the community. Again, she was known as liberal. She was the president of National Organization for Women Local Chapter, strong supporter of Planned Parenthood. And she started meeting with people and they moved forward. And what resulted of it was that they ended up starting a nonprofit called Holly House. They found a house in a residential neighborhood with very little or no opposition. And women who had either pregnant or young children who were trying to overcome addiction issues or even domestic violence, able to come in the house and live there and get all kinds of services. From the county public health nurse would come in and show them the basics of changing diapers, why you don't want to give your kid juice when he's 3 months old because it could rot their teeth, but also GED if they needed it, job training, and just get them back on their feet and give them the skills that they needed and the support that they needed. And this was before we had First Five, before we had many of the things we take for granted now. And one of the biggest champions of it was a conservative judge up in Lompoc. And for them to form that relationship and him to be one of the champions of it, it was just really forward thinking at the time. And because of that, she was nominated and received the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors 4th District Women of the Year back in, I believe it's 93. And then she was honored by Maxwell House, of all things, coffee. They have a 50 American heroes in every year. And so she was one of 50 heroes from throughout the country doing on the ground work. And so she and my dad were flown out to Washington, D.C. with all the others, and they all met each other and shared what they'd done. And at the time, First Lady Barbara Bush, this is when George Bush Sr. was in office, was their keynote, and they met with them. And so for me, it just showed that that's who she really is, and she's still that person. And so then to fast forwarded, I wanted to say it wasn't just 30 years ago in Lompoc, but she's also been affecting change here locally in Santa Barbara. And when she was on the City College board, City College adjunct professor, she fought for labor rights for the adjunct professors because they don't have adequate compensation, and especially health benefits, which we all care about now, and salaries. And she fought to have them join the AFT with the full-time professors. That didn't work. The vote didn't go in their favor, but then she kept moving forward and she fought to have and lead the charge to get rehire rights for the adjunct professors so they have some stability in their jobs. So those were two bookends, but she has a whole lifetime of service. So I just wanted people to understand, because I think there's this judgment of my mom right now on that one moment on the pledge, but she has a whole complex history. just like all of us do. Everybody has a complex story, and it's very detrimental to having conversations and difficult conversations that we need to have when we start putting people into one place at a time for one incident and trying to define their whole life. So I wanted to take that opportunity to clarify it, because I know behind the scenes people had been trying to say certain things about my mom, and so I wanted to let the whole community know this is who she is, who she always has been, and who she always will be.
And just in terms of context for those who don't know, as I understand it, and feel free to correct me, Eric, connect the dots. The Board of Trustees at City College had voted to stop saying the pledge at the beginning of their meetings, and there was a backlash among some. I'll say some conservatives, or just some people who felt like, why are we doing this? And around that time, when Celeste was speaking, there was a dual controversy where an administrator had used the unabbreviated version of the N-word, and that administrator was suspended, but there was calls for that administrator to be let go. And there were people at that meeting who were calling on the superintendent and the administration to take stronger action against that individual. So it was sort of this combination of these two events that were coming up at the same time. People who were very upset that this person had been allowed to keep their job. And then your mother is there to say the pledge because it means something to her. And then, there's a member of the audience, and there's some conflict that is going on. And all of those things all came together in that one moment. And that painted Celeste as sort of being more focused on the pledge issue and not the actual, not why a lot of people were in the room at the moment. So it sort of felt like there was a disconnect by some. And also she was endorsed by the Santa Barbara County Republican Party. And so all of those is like, wait a minute, Eric's, the perception was, and I'm not saying this is it, but this is her context. Perception is Eric's mom is a conservative and she's running for the seat against Anna Everett, who was endorsed by the Democratic Party. And then she was involved in all that stuff going on with the pledge. And here's Eric Friedman, who's a Democrat who worked for Salud Carbajal, who's on the council, seeking an endorsement. And so all of that is sort of like what we're dealing with here in terms of the bigger context. Is that a fair summary of sort of how we got to this point from your perspective, Eric?
Yeah, I think it is. And again, it gets to the issue we talked about is there's a lot of complexities and there's a lot of nuance in everything that happened. The one thing I would add to what you just said, Josh, is that my mom had no idea there was going to be a protest that day. And so if she had gone the week before or the week later, it wouldn't have gone to a viral video that happened, and it wouldn't have turned out the way it did. So, but in the end, that's why I took the opportunity to go into that detailed explanation at the Central Committee, because I think there's much more to my mom's story than that. And so that's why I wanted to take that opportunity to share some more about her, because I think most people only saw that one clip or that one incident about her. So that's why I chose to answer the question in the way I did.
And was there any thought process of you just sort of saying, this is my mom, that's a personal matter. I'm always going to love my mom. I'm always going to support her regardless of whether we disagree, but can we please talk about my policy issues and what I've done on the city council? Did that enter you as an answer at all?
Yeah, so I just think it is unfortunate that, I'm running for re-election for the Santa Barbara City Council, and I've been on there over 3 years now. And the first question I get is about my mom. And I think it should be more reflective of when we're running of what we've done at the city on ourselves. And so it's just unfortunate that it's centered around my mom and that controversy. And I'm hopeful going forward that myself and the Central Committee and the community at large can really focus on the city issues. But again, the reason I decided to give that detailed explanation is because I think there were many individuals who actually wanted to understand what actually happened. And just to say that, she's my mom and that's it, wasn't going to answer it for them. Because for me, I thought about that beforehand. If I get this question, should I answer it that way? And the reality is if it was enough for them to just say, hey, it's his mom, the question would not have been asked, because then they would have said it is his mom, so we're going to leave it alone and we're going to focus on the issues. But it was asked, so they obviously wanted to hear what I had to say about it rather than just she's my mom. So that's the thought process I went through.
Okay. And the other part of their skepticism, at least at that meeting initially with the endorsement, was your ability to endorse, or your history of endorsing Democrats. So Kathy Murillo is running for re-election, and as far as I know, you've not endorsed her. I think Megan Harmon has, and I think Oscar Gutierrez has, but you have not. I'm not sure you endorsed Oscar Gutierrez. Is another name that I had heard. So there was a question of, wait, Eric has not endorsed other Democratic Party candidates, some of them people of color, and then he wants our endorsement. So can you talk a little bit about that process for you, and what sort of your thinking is along that line of questioning?
Yeah, thanks for the question. That did come up, and what I set up there is about endorsements. Is I have a long history of working for the party, walking precincts, going back probably over 20 years since I came back to Santa Barbara, and I've endorsed plenty of candidates throughout the county, from Santa Maria even all the way down into Ventura and Oxnard. And so I have endorsed, and I've walked, I've contributed financially, phone banked, whatever it takes. And I didn't endorse in the last round of city council elections because I was a candidate. So I did not endorse as I was running for office at the time. And then in the last couple of special elections that come up, I haven't endorsed for the most part because I feel that when you're up on the dais, you have to be able to work with whoever the voters send up there with you. And for me, it's important to start off on an ability to have those conversations, to be able to work with them. And it's a different footing when you talk about, hey, you made it up here, you don't owe me anything, but we can work together, versus them looking at me thinking I didn't want them up here. And in the case of one council, it was the case of Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez and Jason Dominguez. I worked with Jason, and we definitely had our differences, but he also supported some of the legislation that we supported. And a lot of times you need 5 votes to be able to make effective change that's going to benefit the community. So that's a strategy I've taken. Some may disagree with it, but that is the approach I've taken, and that's what I tried to convey. But again, I've endorsed many candidates. I've walked for many candidates, again, all the way from Ventura, Oxnard, the Ventura County Board of Supervisors, up to City of Santa Maria, including past candidates that have run for the City of Santa Barbara Council.
Do you see their logic? I feel as though this question, in terms of their endorsement, holds a little bit more weight because this is a direct correlation. Okay, they're a party. They're all about getting the best Democrat candidates in office, and it takes work. It doesn't just happen. I know that there are some who think that it's just sort of easy, but the party's worked for 20 years to sort of create this movement in order to groom candidates generation after generation and get them into office. And you can agree or disagree whether that's appropriate, but the fact of the matter is they've been effective at doing that. And they want the people they endorse to support other candidates that they've endorsed. And if you start sort of splintering it off, it feels to them as though they're not on the same page. And that opens the door to other people, from their perspective, conservatives coming in and sort of trying to win a seat or poke at sort of disarray, among the party. Do you see at all their logic in saying, hey, Eric, you want the party to support you, and you benefited from the party. You were endorsed by them, I believe, when you ran the first time. Why can't you support our candidates too? I mean, do you see that side of it from their perspective?
No, I see where they're coming from, and that's why I took the time to say that I have endorsed candidates many times, and I've continued to do so. And I haven't actively campaigned against and haven't run against any other candidates. And that's happened with other races, with other individuals. So I think it really comes down to we're a small community and we have a lot of independent thinkers here. And so for me, it was explaining I have endorsed candidates and I've walked over the years many times in contentious races. And so I have done that. And there was a perception that I hadn't done that. And I had, so I just wanted to, at that time, say I had done it, and I will continue to do so. I'll continue to support candidates and as we move forward.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about you now. You're obviously running for re-election. You don't have an opponent as of now, correct?
Correct. Don't have one.
And have you heard of any? I have not heard of anybody stepping up to challenge for that seat, right? Have you?
No, I haven't.
Names? Yeah.
I haven't heard of anyone, but anticipate there will be. You always want to play that you want to anticipate there'll be somebody. So at this time, but I haven't heard of anybody.
Yeah, and that's one of the things of district elections, of course, is you get more diversity. Sometimes, though, no one will step up and challenge for a seat, and maybe somebody will challenge for your seat. I don't know that anyone's challenging for the seat that Megan Harmon holds. Obviously, I think Kristen Sneddon has a challenger. For the party to endorse you, though, it does matter because it means resources toward you that they could use in a competitive seat. Let's talk about you and your time on the council. You're serving your 4th year. Have you liked it? Has it been everything you experienced or everything you expected? Talk to me about what it's been like the first term.
Well, it's been beyond what I ever could have imagined, as you could say. I mean, going in, you always expect coming in that you're going to learn and it's going to be a kind of a whirlwind when you first get in there. But these 3 years for our community and for the council in particular have just been some of the most challenging in the history of our city. I mean, myself, the mayor and Councilmember Kristen Sneddon were sworn in on the day of the debris flow. So our first 3 months in office was something unlike we'd ever experienced in our city. And then we started to get our footing, started to go forward and really get back to not just focusing on the emergency response, but starting again looking at housing and those issues. And then just when we're back on a kind of normal footing, we had the Conception dive boat disaster, the largest maritime disaster in our state that our community came through. And then we get through that, and then the pandemic comes. And that just has really just thrown things out, the traditional playbook out the window. So, but even within that, there's been, I'd say, there's been a lot of very high highs and a lot of very low lows. And of course, there's times I considered, why did I get into this job? I don't want to do it again. But you just have to go through those lows. And then when you have the highs where you pass some significant legislation. See, one example is one of the highs was the night I remember when we voted to create a pedestrian mall on State Street in response to the pandemic. And it had been something that had been discussed in town for over 30 years. And this council was able to do that. And I remember afterwards, we're back in the offices and we had our masks on and everything, but we're like, if we could high five each other and touch, we'd all be giving high fives because this is something so momentous that we're going to have a real chance to see how it works. And it was just great to be a part of something. I think we look back on history that was a major moment in our city to look at for that change. So I think getting through the tough times has made the successes we've had more rewarding and in a good place now where I think I am ready to run for election. I am running for re-election, and I look forward to continuing to serve on a lot of these issues that are really complex that we're trying to deal with.
I've been covering the council since the early 2000s, with a break here and there to, when I left the area and stuff. But I have to say that this version of the council, and you feel free to disagree. It's a conversation. It's not, you can tell me stop, Josh. It's fine. But this version of the council to me seems to be the most splintered that I've ever seen in terms of people sort of doing their own thing. And there's sometimes arguing, calling people out individually in meetings publicly, which in the old days, they'd handle that behind the scenes. And when they'd get up there, it'd be like, we're all get along here. You knew they didn't, but at least they presented that front. And so it's just interesting to sort of see, and during the pandemic, there's hours sometimes of public comment, and sometimes it's directed at the mayor, and sometimes some other council members will get called out. Do you what do you think of the state of the seven of you? And if you feel like it's insider baseball, that's fine. But sometimes I'm watching it and I actually feel like, oh my God, this is embarrassing. Like, this is Santa Barbara, and these people like just can't get along, or they're just getting hammered by the public, and they don't know how to just like apologize and move on. Instead, it's got to be like defend, 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 and not you, but some others. um, how does that feel for you when you know that mood is sort of that, you know, all of a sudden you feel like, uh-oh, it's going to be one of those days on the council?
Well, as you know, Josh, I've taken an approach of say very little up there unless I really have to, and because of want it on there. So I I think that ultimately we do have our differences up there. And one of the biggest challenges that we face as a council is that we're not in the chambers. It makes a big difference being in the chambers. And I also think it makes a big difference from the public too, to have to come into the chambers and look somebody in the eye. And when you're talking about them, either positively or criticizing them, and when you're in there and we can see the body language of our colleagues and we can feel that inside the chambers, and we get to know each other through that, and then afterwards when we're talking, and we don't have that now because it's more like it's the analogy I use now is the council is more like a reality TV show in which we're actual participants where we chime in and chime out rather than being in the chamber. And I'd forgotten that until about a month ago. I have an intern that I started this year, and we had never actually met in person. And so I said, now that vaccines are out and there's safety protocols, did you want to come in and get a tour? So she came in, and my oldest son came with me, and a member of the staff member started giving us a tour just at City Hall. And so it was the first time I met my own intern, which was interesting because I had her for a couple months. And then we went into the chambers, and it was the first time I'd been in the chambers in many months because the doors are always locked. And as soon as you walk in that room, you get this really positive energy, and you realize like this is where our community has had so many debates. It's like all of the ghosts of the past come in. And the intern actually was the first one to notice. She said there's a different energy in this room, and all of us were there. So I think that's part of it, is we haven't had the same opportunity to get to know each other as people and as council members because the fact that we're on Zoom calls on it. And then also I think that the public comment does go on for longer because more people are able to call in. So it elongates the public comment. But in terms of the council, I think we do need to learn as a body to really try to talk things out behind the scenes so it doesn't blow up in public, because I think it is a reflection on the city when it does happen. But we're all learning, and I think we have made steps in trying to correct that that course where we're just arguing up there on a personal level, not on a policy level. And I think it has toned down somewhat recently.
Let me ask you about equity, which is, you're an elected official, so you shape policy, right? So you can decide what things look like from a policy level, and then you tell the administration to implement it. And obviously we had a tumultuous 2020. We had the Black Lives Matter rally and demonstration and protest, and obviously Mayor Kathy Maria was involved at the tail end of that, and was the recipient of a lot of fallout because of that. And you do hear that coming up during public comment often on various issues that thread throughout the city. And I'm wondering if you could just talk to me about the importance of Santa Barbara elected officials, administration, boards and commissions being more inclusive of people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color, the whole variety of people who have been not really allowed to participate in the past, the way that some others have. And I'm wondering if you can talk about, how important is that to you? And I know it's to say, of course, it's important to you, but specifically, how important is that to you as elected? You actually have the power to make change when it comes to better representation, in Santa Barbara. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you, Eric?
Yeah, I thank you for the question, because I think equity, it takes a long time to build it, and you have to constantly keep building it. And so I think with our boards and commissions in particular, doing the outreach to let people know that these openings are there, so it allows people to come in. And I think as council members, it's important that we have our boards and commissions which advise the council, and in some cases they actually make decisions that could come to council, to have a say in those boards and commissions, because it's more reflective of the community as a whole. So we have an obligation to really consider who's the best qualified and who are representatives of the community when we're making appointments to the boards and commissions. Because what being on there, what it allows an individual to do is understand how the city works, contribute, feel empowered in the city. And then if and when they decide to run for office, maybe even council someday, they have this whole history they can rely upon of learning the city, understanding how budgeting works, understanding where city staff are. For example, I'll take myself as an example. I ran and was appointed and served on the city library advisory board for 10 years. And without that experience, I wouldn't know the city and I wouldn't understand it as well. So, and you get to really focus on issues you're passionate about. And there's so many people in the community who are passionate about so many issues, and to be able to have that constructive way to really shape policy in the city, and they start having a voice. So I think it's important, and it doesn't happen overnight. So it just needs to continue. Each council member needs to take it seriously. And then also the city administrator down through the organization really looks at diversity of who we hire, from department heads all the way down to our staff. So I think as an organization, we're doing well, but we need to improve, and we are taking strides to improve in that sense. But for us as a council, I think the boards and commissions are key for us to not only get people on them, but also shows that we're committed to it.
And just as a follow-up, why is that what is the importance of equity from your perspective? Because I think a lot of electeds talk about it like, oh, of course we need equity, but like on the ground, like, why is that important from your perspective? Why do we need representation of the community actually in leadership roles within City Hall? Explain the importance of that, and why does it matter?
I'd say the number one thing about equity is that it improves communication, because if you have a certain life experience, then you're able to bring that to the table. And then you're able to also listen to others who have different life experiences, all within the same city. Because you could live in this city your whole life and have a completely different experience than somebody else who's also lived in the city their whole life. So to have that, because we're a city that we serve 93,000 people of vast differences in their lives. And we need to serve everybody. The council in particular needs to be able to serve the entire city to make it better for all. And when we're equitable, we are basically serving everyone. So to have information and to have communication from everywhere, every neighborhood is so important. I mean, that's why we went to district elections. And I think some of the issues that come up with council have shown, why district elections are important, because some of the voices in the neighborhoods that have been neglected for so long have been brought up, in particular by their elected district representatives. But I also take the approach that because we have that representation in neighborhoods, the other council members need to also work in those neighborhoods as well with those council members. So it's something where you represent your neighborhood on the council, but you also represent the whole city and work with them. So the more viewpoints and the more leadership we have from the community to inform us, the better off we'll be. And that's, to me, what equity is.
Yeah, and the other part of it is, when young kids, right, when people see people of color in leadership positions, they feel like they belong too. So it's as though, oh, you're there, I can get there too, and that's a big part of it. as well. And then, as you mentioned, like we talk about Ortega Park, the mural issue, that's a good example. It's like all this outreach and master plan. And then there's a group of people who are like, hey, these murals matter to us, and that's sort of a good example of sort of having all of those different diversity of voices there as well. I wanted to ask you, Eric, one of the things that always struck me when I found out is sort of, quite frankly, impressive about you is that in addition to being a council member, in addition to having that prestige and I'm sure you're pretty humble about being a council member, but people look at elected officials as having sort of a layer and a certain kind of status to them. At the same time, you're working over there at Trader Joe's, you're stocking the shelves and you're I guess bagging, and you're just doing everything people do at Trader Joe's. And I just wanted to ask you about that. Like, why do you work at Trader Joe's when you're an elected member of the city council?
Well, I love working there. It's such a fun job. And I've met so many great coworkers and and the customers there. It's just a great place to work. And for me, of course, Santa Barbara, it's tough. Many people have to work 2-3 jobs just to support their families. So for me, it was the opportunity to be able to work in a fun environment and that is flexible so I could serve on council. But with Trader Joe's, what I feel is that it's actually taught me so much just in my life from the people I work with and the customers, and it's made me a more reflective and more in tune with the community of what the real challenges are here, especially during the past 3 years. Working at Trader Joe's in a grocery store during the pandemic while on city council, those are 2 jobs that I think, going back a few years ago and you'd say, this is going to happen. Would you sign up to work both of those simultaneously? I don't think anybody would voluntarily do that. But what I saw during the pandemic, I had an insider's view of the workers, frontline workers, myself being one, but also the community. And some of the things I'll never forget about the pandemic, a lot of it happened at Trader Joe's. I remember right before the first lockdown came, and it was like February of 2020, is the virus was spreading and there was a lot of lockdowns in Europe. And so everyone started worrying that the supply chain of food was going to come in. So we started having these mass rushes at the grocery stores, and the grocery stores weren't expecting it. And so you had all these staff and all of us were literally doing like 2 nights or 2 days of work in one day, because you'd have people coming in and just buying, normally $100, they were buying like $500 or $600 worth of groceries because they were so afraid the food was going to go out. And you could see the panic in people's eyes. And we were so exhausted. We come back the next day, we were just so exhausted. And then the one thing about it though, is when the community comes in, and throughout the entire pandemic, is it's actually a normal setting place for the community because they love Trader Joe's and they come in. And when the world was chaotic this last year, they had that half an hour where they come in and say, yeah, it's a little different in here, but it's the same people I know, the same workers are here, and Trader Joe's is still Trader Joe's. And it gave them this sense of calm of coming into the store. And I also like it because just random constituents, people of the city will just come in and start talking to me for a minute or say, hey, this is on my mind. So I know what's on people's minds because they tell me. And everyone's very respectful to just say, hey, this is on my mind. And they don't make it into a city council interaction. They make it into, hey, I just want you to think about this, or they give me feedback on stuff. So it's really cool. And the other thing too is my coworkers got me through so many down times during the last year. And I want to call out 2 of them, Josh.
Mm-hmm.
There's 2 in particular. I could call out all of them and I don't want to forget somebody, but 2. The first one I want to call out is somebody you know very well, is Kai Zhang. And he's just a remarkable young man, and his partner Haley. He's just a great individual and so positive. And so he's been out there and he was a journalist. He's under you, Josh. He was studying, and he's also in a band, and it's a rising band right now called Trout Club. And they just did this great video where they did some drone footage, and you can get it on YouTube. Just go on YouTube and put Trout Club. And you're going to see some great footage up on San Marcos Pass of our whole area and this band. And I'll never forget this night where it's in the middle of the pandemic, and his band got on KJEE for the local featuring of a local band. So he was working that night, and Haley and all of us there. And then they let him go out to his car during the break because they were going to play his song. So he goes out to his car, And then you can hear him and Haley screaming because it's the first time he ever heard his song on the radio. It was the first time. And they were so excited. And they came in and everybody was so excited. And it's like stories like that, during this pandemic, there was just such a positive thing. And to be there when he first heard a song of his on the radio, it's like that movie back in the 90s, that thing you do, and they get all excited because the song's on the radio for the first time. It was just great. And to know how a remarkable individual he is, I'm just really happy for him.
Yeah.
And the other one I want to call out real quickly is James Haskins. We call him Gelato. That's his nickname at Trader Joe's.
Okay.
Because he makes this amazing gelato, and he's been trying to open his gelato business for like years. And he actually just opened it right on State Street downtown where the old Wetzel's Pretzels is.
Yeah.
And he has a passion for it. And we've all supported him. And, he finally got it open. And he would tell me about the whole permitting process the city was going through. So I learned from him firsthand what it was like, and then the landlords and what the landlords are doing. So I'm going to work and learning from him, a young entrepreneur. And it turns out that we had known each other when we were kids, when we lived at the Molina apartments and when I moved away. So I hadn't seen him for 30 years, and we finally put 2 and 2 together. And for him to open up a business during this time and achieve his life dream, and to see him there now on State Street at Tondi Gelato, it's just inspirational. And we all showed up, the Trader Joe's employees showed up this first day, and we keep going there. And it means a lot to him that his friends and coworkers there are supporting his business, and he's trying to make a go of it. So those are like the really hopeful stories and why I love working there. And there's so many more of the individuals that work there. And so, like I said, it really keeps me grounded and in touch with what's going on, especially during the pandemic.
Yeah, I don't know James, but I did write about him when he opened up that shop right there at Paseo Nuevo. And so now I can make a connection of a little bit. Kai, of course, is like one of the most unique and charismatic and wonderful people. He just can enter a room and everyone gets happy around him. So he definitely has that quality for sure. I've seen you in there. I've been shopping. How much of that is like a family values thing for you in terms of working? You need to work financially. You have obviously get paid at Santa Barbara. I guess the question is trying to get at you, the man, the person who works at Trader Joe's, but also works the city council. You're providing for your family, right? I mean, this is why you work here, correct? This is why you work there.
Sorry, the phone rang there. Yes. So yeah, it is an issue where we need to really, I want to show my kids, like, if you want to make it, especially in this town, you got to put a lot of hard work in there. And so part of it's financial, but the other part is that you putting in the hours and just really doing whatever it takes to do it. And so that's the approach I take on city council too, is that you have to do whatever it takes, and you have to work with whoever comes forward and whatever issue is there. And that's what a grocery store is too. You work with whatever customer is there, whatever coworker you have when you come in. And so for me, it's just about a work ethic and doing whatever it takes. And I think for me, it's been very humbling, because you're right. When you're saying, I'm on the city council and there's certain expectations that people have, but at the same time, I think the public comes in and say, hey, you know what, I'm putting groceries on the shelves, or, sometimes I have to clean the bathrooms, and people see that and they're like, well, this is what Santa Barbara is. Because I think a vast majority of people in Santa Barbara are struggling to make it here. And we're not the 80s soap opera Santa Barbara where everybody's wealthy and famous here. So I think for the public at large to have a council member who works at a grocery store, it just gives them a sense of who we are as a city, that we have these different jobs that we have to have, and we all struggle to survive here and do what it takes. And so it's a very humbling experience working there for me.
Yeah. Okay. Let's bring it full circle before we wrap up here, Eric. We started talking about the endorsement process. They decided to wait, I guess. They did not choose to endorse you or not endorse you. I guess what I've heard is that you might be given opportunity to go back and talk to them at a future meeting. They spent most of their time on, the mayor's race and other issues when they were deliberating the party. Do you want their endorsement? Are you going to go back? How much are you willing to fight for this endorsement. Kind of walk us through sort of where you're at today.
Well, Josh, I've been a lifelong Democrat, still a Democrat, and of course I want the endorsement. It means a lot. I think the Democratic Party has a certain set of values that we all value, so definitely am open to it. And when I'm called and we have a conversation on what the next steps is in terms of going back, or if there's another process, I'll talk with them from the leadership of the Central Committee and see where it goes from there. But of course, to have the endorsement means a lot. And like I said, I had it last time. I've endorsed other candidates in the past, and I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I'm proud of that.
Okay. Well, it's not this interview is not intended to be a campaign thing for you at all. But before we wrap up, I just want to sort of give you the last word here, sort of talk to me about your time on the council and, your thoughts on, going forward if you're reelected.
Yeah, so the time of the council has been really, really rewarding. I know I talked earlier about the ups and the downs, but what really excites me when we're on the council and being on the council is to move projects forward that really benefit the community. And also for me, it's constituent service. That's what I really focused on. It's been ingrained in me when I worked for Naomi Schwartz, Luke Carbajal, and I was an intern for Jack O'Connell. For all those years, is to be responsive to the public, whether they're in the 5th district or throughout the city. Because I think there's nothing worse than having an issue, contacting the city hall and not getting a response, especially if you need some help, not just a form letter that you're sending in support of an issue, but something where you actually need some assistance. And so that's the approach I've taken, is to take that seriously and to be responsive and be accessible. And some of the things that I really want to be able to be on council for next time to see through is I'm a big supporter of the libraries. And I think for me, libraries are just such important institutions. And before on council, when I served on the library board and the Friends of the Library Board, I worked with so many people to secure the funding to build the children's library. And myself and another board member, when you talk about the importance of boards and commissions, we served on the library advisory board, and we went to the previous council to say, hey, you guys need to put in $500,000 in your budget so that this thing can get built, so the foundation can come in and say, hey, the city's invested. And if we hadn't been there, they might not have done it, and that library might not have got built. And the same thing is happening with Library Plaza right now, because we're redesigning it, and we're going to be able to expand services for the children's library out there that serves everybody. And so since I've been on council, I've been able to really invest in the library, $1.5 million that I was able to work with my colleagues to allocate, and the foundation is going forward, and we're hopefully going to be able to bring that project to construction next year. And I remember seeing the first plans for it or design scope back in about 2007 at a library board meeting. So you're talking 15 or so years. So I want to be on council when that's there, because as I say, I worked on this for 15 years, so it's come full circle and things like that. So it's just the timing and to be able to continue the work that we're doing. And there's a lot of projects like that that are out there, but the library is just one on the plaza that I'm really looking forward to, and continuing to work and provide, be responsive to the residents, because that's what they really want.
Great, Eric. Well, it's my pleasure to talk to you and allow you the opportunity to talk in detail about some of these issues. And I'll look forward to next council meeting. I'm always taking notes, and when I hear Eric start quoting literature or a textbook he read in college or a famous quote or something, my ears always perk up, like, uh-oh, what's this one going to be? So it's always fun to cover you. So
well, thanks, Josh. It's been an honor to be on the show. And can I leave you with one last thing, Josh, just on the show? I want to give you my thoughts on the podcast, because I've listened to some of your episodes. Is some feedback is I really appreciate the work that you're doing on the podcast, because like 100 years from now, when people are looking back at this time, they're going to have so many interviews of just ordinary leaders that weren't elected, but just leaders in the community, and you've allowed them to be able to tell their story. So it's going to be very valuable to understanding the context of this time, because we don't have that from 100 years ago. We have just newspaper articles and these things. So I think that this is very important work you're doing here, and the community leaders you've had on here have been just fantastic in the stories that they've shared. So I just really want to say I value what you're doing here, and just keep up the good work and giving a voice to all these great community leaders that you've had on here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, this is the first time you've been on the show, and I launched it, you know, almost a year ago. And one of the reasons was that I try not to have too many electeds on the show because I feel like they have a platform for the most part. And so I really work hard to reach out to people who are doing things on the ground in the community, but may not have once a week, multiple times a week on a stage where everybody can already hear them talk. And so that's definitely one of the things that I've been trying to do. And it's sort of, you know, as a reporter for so long, you do an interview, and how much of it makes it into a story? You know, a quote, maybe two quotes. Sometimes they'll say, was that a context? Or they'll say, why didn't you take this other thing? And it's a very small percentage. It's a fraction of that conversation that you had. And a lot of times you really have a really good conversation with somebody. And so I just thought the podcast would be an opportunity for people to hear the whole conversation. And that way they can decide for themselves. You know, there's no effort to, you know, put you in this angle of a story here. It's just Eric talking, you know. And so I appreciate that. It's just an opportunity to have kind of a historical archive of what people are saying and what people are doing. And, you know, if you have any recommendations, you know, anybody watching, you know, it's just like, I want people who are on the ground doing things and making an impact. And they may not necessarily be the headline maker, but they are people in the community who people know are doing things. So thank you for that recognition. And I guess that's pretty much it. Thanks a lot, Eric. Good luck to you and you know, your process going forward. And I'll be covering you. Looking forward to whenever City Hall opens again, whenever that is, and I can walk in that council chamber and see you, and you can see all your constituents too. So thank you.
Thank you, Josh.